The champagne cork popped like a gunshot. I watched it fly across the room as my mother raised her glass at her 60th birthday party. The whole neighborhood was there. My sister Paige and her perfect husband. The HOA president. The church pastor. Even the neighborhood council members. I stood quietly in the corner with my daughter Lily, holding her small hand under the table. My mother tapped her glass 3 times deliberately. Everyone went completely silent. I thought she would thank everyone for making the effort to come celebrate her. Instead, she smiled right at me, and in that smile, everything changed forever. "Tessa," she said sweetly, in that voice she used when she wanted people to pay attention, "you've always done what you could." The room felt like it was holding its breath. But some of us have truly built something here. Something real. Something that matters. She turned to Paige with pride radiating from her face. My sister beamed like she had just won an award. "That's why I'm leaving everything to Paige and her husband. Tessa hasn't helped this family nearly enough. She chose her own life instead." The words hung in the air like a slap. Then someone laughed nervously. Then everyone did. Awkward at first. Then real and cutting. I felt Lily squeeze my hand so hard it hurt. Paige squeezed my shoulder from behind like I was a dog that needed comforting. I saw pity in people's eyes. Amusement. Discomfort mixing together. My mother looked at me with pure satisfaction, no regret anywhere on her face. She raised her glass even higher. "To the family that actually builds things," she announced loudly. Everyone clinked their glasses together. I stood there, invisible in a room full of people watching me completely disappear. I spent the rest of the evening like a ghost moving through a party that had stopped being mine the moment my mother opened her mouth. I carried trays of untouched food. I picked up empty champagne glasses. I wiped down counters nobody had asked me to wipe. I pretended to be part of something I had just been publicly cut out of. Nobody stopped me. They were used to me being helpful and invisible, the background character nobody noticed unless they needed something done. Paige sat in the center of the living room like a pageant queen who had finally won her crown, soaking up every compliment that came her way. "You must be so incredibly proud," people kept saying to her. "Taking over the family legacy like this." I heard my aunt in the kitchen say to someone, "Well, Tessa's good for errands at least." That's something. Something inside me didn't just break. It shattered. Not the kind of breaking that happens all at once like glass dropped on tile. The kind that happens slowly, fiber by fiber, like a rope snapping on a dock. One strand at a time until suddenly there's nothing holding anything together anymore. For 15 years, I had played the perfect background character in their elaborate little family play. I showed up. I helped. I never asked for credit. I never asked for anything at all. And this was my reward for loyalty. Standing in the kitchen rinsing champagne glasses while genuine laughter echoed from the other room. Paige found me there and grabbed my arm suddenly. I jumped. "Try not to make this awkward," she whispered with a smug smile full of satisfaction. "People are really uncomfortable." I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. And I realized I didn't know her anymore. Maybe I never actually had. The next few days were strange and quiet in a way that made everything feel unreal. That kind of quiet that comes after something important breaks and everyone is pretending not to notice. Friends who had been at the party sent awkward text messages. Not apologies for what my mother actually did. Apologies for how uncomfortable it was for them. Like I was supposed to apologize for making their evening less perfect. My mother posted beautiful pictures online the next day. All smiles and family love. She tagged Paige in every single one. She didn't tag me in any of them. Paige sent me a cheerful text asking if I could help organize an HOA subcommittee for her husband's new renovation project. I stared at the message for a very long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed one word deliberately, no. That's all. No excuses. No apology for saying no. No explanation or justification. Just no. Paige called me immediately, her voice angry. "What do you mean no?" she demanded. I didn't answer. I let the silence speak for itself and tell her everything she needed to know. She hung up furious, but that silence told her something important. It told her that things had fundamentally changed. That I wasn't going to be the background character anymore. That evening, I tucked Lily into bed and kissed her forehead gently. She was quiet as I pulled the blanket up to her chin carefully. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked with concern. I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about Lily at that moment. I was thinking about something else entirely. Something I hadn't looked at in years. I went downstairs and opened a file on my computer. Property deeds. My property deeds. Most people in this neighborhood don't know this about me, but I own 3 duplexes. Not just rentals. Actual properties. Not because I'm rich or came from money. Far from it. I own them because I was abandoned when I was pregnant at 23 years old, and I worked so hard that I practically disappeared into my work for years. I saved every single penny. I made smart choices that nobody noticed. I bought the first duplex with a small inheritance from my grandfather. The other 2 came from years of scraping together money from side jobs, working late nights, and taking calculated risks nobody knew about. Nobody in my family knows I own them. Not my mother. Not Paige. Not a single person in my family. I manage them through a neutral property company so they can't possibly trace the ownership back to me. I did it to protect Lily from family drama. I did it to keep my peace and my privacy. I didn't need my family knowing my business or using it against me. But sitting in my quiet house that night, staring at those 3 deeds on my screen in the dark, a new thought appeared in my mind like a light suddenly switching on. They think they own this neighborhood. They think they have all the power here. But I actually own pieces of it. Real, tangible, legal pieces. Not for power. I never wanted power over anyone. I wanted stability for myself and Lily. But power is a funny thing. Sometimes it sits quietly in your hands the whole time, and you don't even realize you're holding it. The next morning, I received a formal HOA notice. My mother had stopped paying her dues. I almost laughed when I read it. Almost. When Paige called that afternoon, she didn't ask how I was doing after the party. She didn't apologize. She asked if I could do her a solid and use my job connections to rush through a renovation permit for their guest house. I worked in city planning. I had connections. Normally, I would have said yes automatically. I would have made calls and pulled strings and done whatever she asked. This time, I didn't hesitate. "No, I can't," I said evenly. She laughed like I had told a joke. When she realized I wasn't laughing too, her voice turned icy. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I hung up calmly, but my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Something exhilarating. The strange, electric feeling of stepping out of an old role that no longer fit. That evening, I received a group email from my mother to the entire HOA board. She was complaining about unreasonable rules. She was threatening to take it up the chain. She was doing what she always did. Assuming that rules didn't apply to her. Assuming that her status would protect her. I read the email 3 times. Then I saved it. I would need it later. Over the next week, I worked quietly. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just started compiling. Every lease agreement for my properties. Every HOA bylaw. Every tax receipt. Every repair invoice. Years of doing things the right way had built a fortress I didn't even realize I had constructed. In contrast, my mother and Paige treated neighborhood rules like they were suggestions. Like their status would protect them from consequences. I documented every single infraction. The unpermitted guesthouse structures. The unpaid HOA fees. The misused community funds. It wasn't about getting revenge. Revenge sounded cold and angry. This was different. This was about drawing a line. A line they didn't know existed. A line that separated people who followed the rules from people who thought rules didn't apply to them. I organized everything into folders. Color-coded tabs. Everything was meticulously perfect. One evening, as I was filing the last document, my phone buzzed. It was a text from one of my tenants. "Ms. Tessa, there's an eviction notice taped to my door." I felt something cold slide down my spine. I drove over immediately. The notice was fake. I knew it was fake the moment I saw it. And I recognized the signature at the bottom. Paige's husband had forged an eviction notice to scare my tenant. The next morning, I walked straight into my parents' house. The house I grew up in. My mother had remodeled it to look like a magazine spread. Cold and perfect and completely empty of warmth. Paige was in the kitchen drinking coffee. She actually looked surprised to see me. I placed the fake eviction notice on the marble counter between us. "This stops now," I said evenly. She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, that? A misunderstanding, I'm sure." But I saw the flicker in her eyes. She knew exactly what she had done. My mother appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. She didn't even ask what was happening. She just sided with Paige immediately. "Tessa, don't be dramatic," she said, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Like I wasn't holding evidence of fraud in my hands. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just picked up the notice and walked out. I got in my car and called my attorney. It was the first time I had called him in years. That afternoon, he looked at the fake notice and said 6 words that changed everything: "This is clear-cut harassment and fraud." Over the next 2 weeks, I started talking to people. Quietly. Strategically. People who had been wronged by my mother and Paige over the years. There were more of them than I expected. A neighbor whose garden shed Paige had reported out of spite. A single dad they had pushed off the HOA board because his kids were too loud. An elderly couple who had been publicly shamed because their fence was 1 inch too tall. People remembered these things. They had been carrying them around for years. And surprisingly, many of them trusted me. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for truth. I asked if they would be willing to provide documentation. Statements. The truth. What I got back was more than I expected. Files thick with receipts. Written statements. Willingness to speak up. One neighbor, Mrs. Chen, handed me a folder that was literally 2 inches thick. "I've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to them," she whispered. That word spread. Quietly. Person to person. By the time I brought my first official complaint to the HOA board, they already knew what was coming. I brought one minor violation to the board formally. The unpaid HOA dues. My mother assumed, like always, that they would let it slide. That her status would protect her. That I wouldn't actually do anything about it. But with the treasurer and several neighbors quietly backing me now, the board voted to issue a formal notice. My mother's face when the motion passed 6-1 is burned into my memory. Disbelief. Insult. Fury. Paige tried to regain control with a patronizing speech about family and loyalty. But it rang hollow. Everyone could see through it. I sat quietly during the entire meeting. I didn't need to speak. The truth was doing the work for me. As I left the meeting, Paige muttered under her breath, "You're making a huge mistake." I didn't even look at her. I just kept walking. The smear campaign started almost immediately. Anonymous notes in my mailbox. Snide comments in the school pickup line. Someone even started a rumor that Lily had been acting out in class. It was completely false. At night, when Lily was asleep, I would sit in the quiet of my kitchen and let the hurt wash over me. I wasn't made of stone. I had feelings. The rumors about Lily hurt the most. But each attack only made me sharper. More focused. One evening, a neighbor forwarded me a group email. Paige had sent a message to my mother and a few others outlining their plan to make Tessa look unstable. She had accidentally hit reply all instead of just replying to my mother. The email contained everything. Their strategy. Their goal. Their intention to discredit me publicly. I printed it out. I read it twice. Then I smiled. Not a happy smile. A knowing smile. The kind of smile you get when you suddenly understand exactly how the game is played. I took that email directly to the HOA board. This time, I didn't speak as a wounded daughter. I spoke as a property owner and community member. Calm. Factual. Precise. No emotion. Just evidence. The board chair looked at Paige with something new in his eyes. Distrust. The kind that starts small but grows. Seeds of doubt were planting themselves, not because I had shouted or cried or begged, but because I had stood firm. Because I had told the truth. That night, I received an unexpected text from the HOA treasurer. If you ever run for board, you have my vote. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I was already thinking about that. About the next move. About how to shape things from the inside instead of reacting to them from the outside. Lily's school held a neighborhood fair the following Saturday. For the first time in years, I hosted a small booth. Just me and my daughter and some of my tenants. We sold baked goods that Lily and I had made together the night before. Chocolate chip cookies. Brownies. Lemon bars. It was simple. It was warm. It was real. People showed up. People smiled. They remembered that I was the one who had actually helped them. The one who had listened. The one who had shown up without expecting anything in return. Paige tried to host a rival event across the park. It was stiff and forced. All about image and status. I watched as neighbors gravitated toward authenticity. Toward real warmth. Toward Lily's shy smile as she handed someone a cookie. Paige's booth sat mostly empty. My mother appeared at my booth with a frosty smile. "Don't get comfortable," she whispered before walking away. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My booth was full. Hers was empty. The neighborhood had already made its choice. My attorney and I drafted a formal letter to Paige's husband. We cited the fake eviction notice as harassment and fraud. No threats. Just facts. He backed off immediately. Clearly, he hadn't expected pushback. Clearly, he thought I would just accept whatever they threw at me. Meanwhile, I discovered that their guesthouse expansion had never been permitted. It was a clear violation. I filed the documentation quietly. Everything was timestamped and notarized. I didn't report it immediately. I waited. At the next HOA meeting, the county inspector made a surprise appearance. Someone had called them. I had told a neighbor. The neighbor had told another neighbor. By the time the inspector showed up, my mother and Paige had no idea it was coming. The inspector went through their property methodically. Every illegal addition. Every code violation. The fines were steep. They were given a deadline to either comply or face legal action. My mother tried to step in and demand special treatment. The inspector simply looked at her and said, "Ma'am, everyone follows the same rules." I watched her face crumble. For the first time, someone hadn't treated her like she was special. Someone had held her accountable like everyone else. Paige turned to me as the inspector left and hissed, "You'll pay for this." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The inspector had said everything that needed saying. When HOA elections came around 3 months later, I didn't campaign. I didn't make speeches. I didn't ask for votes. I didn't need to. Neighbors nominated me on their own. I accepted quietly, and when the votes were counted, I won a board seat. Not by a huge margin. But I won. My mother looked genuinely stunned. Paige plastered on a fake smile for the cameras, but I could see her hands shaking. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to their world. I was shaping it. I was building something real. After the meeting, my mother cornered me in the hallway. "You've humiliated this family," she spat. I replied softly, "No, Mom. I just stopped covering for it." She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She had no comeback for that. There was no way to argue with the truth. Desperate and running out of moves, Paige hosted an elaborate neighborhood gala at my mother's house. The goal was obvious. Regain control through spectacle and charm. She even tried to butter me up with a personal invitation. I showed up briefly. I smiled politely. I said hello to a few people. Then I excused myself and left. I checked my phone in the car. I had sent a message to one of the neighbors earlier that week. The one who had helped me so much. I had asked him to call in a tip. 30 minutes later, the county inspector returned to the party. I watched from my car as guests started noticing. As confusion rippled through the crowd. As officials started walking through rooms with clipboards. The inspector issued final notices on multiple violations right there in front of everyone. I could see the hum of gossip even from where I sat. My mother stood frozen on the porch, wine glass trembling in her hand. The HOA board convened a special meeting to address the mounting complaints and unpaid dues from my mother's household. They were given two choices. Comply fully within 30 days, or face property liens and removal from any community boards. My mother erupted in indignation. Paige threatened legal action. Nothing landed. The board, bolstered by documentation and neighbor support, held firm. I said very little during the meeting. I didn't need to. The board chair presented all the evidence. He showed the violations. The missed payments. The fake eviction notice. The pattern of harassment. I just sat there calmly, taking notes. As the meeting adjourned, Paige whispered, "You think you've won. Watch." But I had already won. I just didn't need to announce it. Desperate and cornered with few options left, Paige called an emergency neighborhood forum. She was clearly aiming to corner me publicly and discredit me in front of everyone. She stood in front of the entire neighborhood and accused me of meddling. Of destabilizing the entire community. Of trying to act like I run this place. She went on for 15 minutes with increasing passion. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't what they had come to hear. This looked like revenge. This looked petty and small and vindictive. I let her finish her entire dramatic monologue without interrupting once. I just listened quietly. Then I calmly stood up and walked to the front. "Actually," I said quietly, my voice steady and clear, "I do own part of it." The entire room went completely silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming. I laid out, fact by fact, the properties I owned. How long I had actually lived in this neighborhood and invested in it. The real work I had done quietly behind the scenes that nobody appreciated. The tenants I had helped. The families I had supported with fair rents and maintenance. The rules I had learned inside and out. No gloating. No anger. Just truth. Just facts. It shifted the energy instantly and completely. Neighbors looked at me with genuine newfound respect. At Paige with suspicion and disappointment. My mother whispered, barely audible from her seat, "You, what?" I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. With their violations unresolved, unpaid dues mounting, and reputations crumbling, Paige and my mother began turning on each other. Their once flawless front cracked publicly and spectacularly. Paige blamed my mother for getting sloppy. My mother accused Paige of ruining everything. The board issued official fines. The county began formal proceedings on the guest house. Social invitations dried up overnight. The people who had once orbited around them like planets now avoided them completely. I didn't push them harder. I simply stopped shielding them from consequences. I stopped making excuses for them. I let the truth do its work. One evening, as I was locking up my duplex office, I saw Paige sitting alone in her car. She was crying. Really crying. Not performative tears. Real tears. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Spring arrived with a kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. It was the kind of quiet that comes after you finally stop fighting and start actually living your real life. My mother moved temporarily to stay with a cousin upstate. Paige and her husband were forced to significantly downsize their renovations and settle their substantial debts. The fines were steep and unexpected. They were looking at a completely different future from the one they had imagined with such certainty. I kept my seat on the HOA board, working carefully to implement real changes. But more importantly, I kept my peace. My sanity. My life back. Lily and I planted a small garden in our backyard. Our first real garden together. We planted tomatoes and lettuce and bright yellow sunflowers. Every morning, we would go out together and check on them, watching them grow a little bit more. Neighbors started stopping by not out of obligation or fear, but out of genuine warmth and connection. They would admire the garden. They would chat with me about life. They would remember that I was an actual real person, not just a background character in their lives or their drama. Lily started to smile more. The weight lifted from her small shoulders. She could be a kid again instead of watching her mother get hurt. I never gloated. I didn't need to. The truth had done all the work. My name had done all the work. My consistency had done all the work. In the space left behind by my mother's noise and Paige's drama, my life finally had room to breathe. Lily thrived. She was happy. She had her mother back, fully present, not distracted by family drama or trying to be invisible. I was promoted at work. I got a raise. I started a community program helping single parents navigate home ownership. Everything I had built quietly for 15 years was finally visible. But I didn't build it for visibility. I built it for Lily. For myself. For peace. And that's what I finally had. One day, about 6 months after everything fell apart for my mother and Paige, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother. She had written it by hand. The letter was short. She said she was sorry. She said she had been proud and foolish. She said she regretted the words she had spoken at her birthday party. She said she missed me. She asked if we could talk. I read the letter 3 times. Lily asked me what it said. I told her the truth. I told her Grandma was sorry. I told her that sometimes people take a long time to understand things. I didn't call my mother. I wasn't ready for that. But I kept the letter. I put it in a drawer. And I thought about it. Months turned into a year. The neighborhood settled into its new rhythm. My mother paid her dues. Paige and her husband completed their renovations properly, with permits and inspections. Life moved forward quietly. I didn't pretend to forgive my mother quickly. Forgiveness wasn't about moving past what happened. It was about choosing not to carry it anymore. And I was working on that. Slowly. In my own time. Lily asked about Grandma sometimes. I told her we were learning how to have a different kind of relationship. One based on honesty. I finally called my mother 3 months after receiving her letter. We met at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. More human. We didn't immediately start apologizing. We just talked. About Lily. About the neighborhood. About the garden. About normal things. At the end of the conversation, she said, "I'm proud of you, Tessa." I always was. I just didn't know how to show it. I believed her. I also understood that believing her didn't mean erasing what happened. It meant integrating it. It meant accepting that my mother was flawed and human and had hurt me. And that I could move forward anyway. That I could build a relationship with her on new terms. My name is Tessa, and I own 3 duplexes in my neighborhood. I have a daughter named Lily who is happy and thriving. I work in city planning and help families navigate homeownership. I serve on the HOA board and have created new rules that protect renters and first-time homeowners. I didn't do any of this for revenge. I did it because it was right. Because it was honest. Because it was necessary. The invisibility that once hurt me became my greatest strength. While everyone was watching Paige, I was building. While everyone was listening to my mother, I was working. While everyone expected me to crumble, I was creating foundations that would last. And in the end, the truth wasn't cruel. It was just true. And sometimes, truth is the only thing that sets everyone free.